and welcome to Creighton Corner. I'm your host, Kelsey Dawson. Here with us is Fine and Performing Arts professor and costume designer, Lindsay Pape. Thanks for joining us, Lindsay.
Thanks for inviting me.
Lindsay, to begin, I would like to ask you what inspired you to work with costumes and makeup?
Well, I've always been interested in art and theater, and I didn't want to be a struggling artist or a conflicted actress, so I thought costumes was the way to go.
What type of education did you receive to help prepare you for this profession?
Well, I do have a BA in both art and theater, and then I went on to get an MFA in costume design from Carnegie Mellon University.
And what made you decide on Creighton?
Well, actually, Creighton decided on me. They needed a costume designer quickly, and I was in town. I'd just graduated and was looking for a job. I just didn't know Creighton was in search of one.
Have you enjoyed being a professor as well as a costume designer here at Creighton?
Oh, yes. The students are wonderful. My classes are super fun, but then I have to split my time between classes and costume design, so I also have a lot of challenge with the dance department, the theater department, and the musical theater department.
As a professor at Creighton, you have 3 classes that you normally teach, correct?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your makeup design class and maybe what kind of lesson plan you have and what kind of experience your students gain?
Well, in makeup design, pretty much 3/4 of the class is the students coming to class and putting makeup on their face, whether it's to achieve the effect of old age or glamorous makeup like you would use for a news broadcast, or injuries or fantasy or any kind of outlandish makeup we might use on stage. So it's really a hands-on class with people doing makeup on themselves every class day.
How about your costume construction class? What skills do your students develop there?
Well, it's kind of the basics. They learn to use a sewing machine, do hand sewing, make their own pattern, but they also help me work on some of the shows we do at Creighton, as well as build some costume piece for themselves as their final project.
Now, your costume design class is only offered a few times. What skills do your students learn in this class, and why is it offered so few times?
Well, I need to wait until I've got enough students to make the class a challenge, so there can be a little bit of competition and a little bit of interaction and discussion between the students. So I need to wait for at least 3 or 4 students, but they all learn script analysis as well as the steps of design, research, color analysis, how to draw or at least communicate their costume designs fully. So the more in the class, the better.
Some of your own students have had the opportunity to design shows of their own. How does this work?
Well, as long as they've at least taken Costume Design 1, then they are eligible to design for the Student 1X or a student dance piece. And if that goes well, and hopefully they're taking Costume Design 2, then they might be able to design a realized full production like Dancing at Lunasa, which is coming up soon, and Mallory Freilich will be designing that. So that is part of her BFA thesis project.
Have any of your students gone on to do work in the community?
I've got an alumni right now designing shows in the community in Omaha, and I've got another one that went on to get an MFA in costume technology, which is mostly the making of costumes. Mm-hmm. And I have a few students that work with me in the summer for Nebraska Shakespeare as part of my costume crew.
If you could teach any other class here at Creighton, what would it be?
I would love to teach a costume history class, but again, that kind of needs more than just one student who's interested in costume history, ideally also interested in costume design. So I'm waiting for, I don't know when that will be, when we have our own design program.
We previously mentioned that not only do you teach here at Creighton, but you're also the resident costume designer. What steps does a costume designer go through when designing a show?
Oh, well, there's a lot of discussion with the director. What's their concept? What direction do they want to go with the show? And then we do a lot of research, a lot of production meetings, a lot of drawing and painting to try and show the director what I'm talking about. And then there's the whole process of making those costumes actually happen up to a dress rehearsal where hopefully I've succeeded in making something fabulous.
Now there's about 3 processes, the first beginning with research.
Mm-hmm.
What does that entail in the design process?
Well, it's all about looking for primary research, which is essentially photographs of the costumes, say of the time period, or paintings or sculptures, or actual costumes themselves, say if I have some antique costumes in stock, looking at those, and then putting it all together in some kind of exciting collage to present to the director.
Are you researching any shows right now?
I am in the process of researching Into the Woods, our spring musical. So that's looking at a bunch of children's illustrations as well as historical costumes from, say, the 1700s and putting them all together to equal a fairy tale.
How does the actual designing process work?
Well, that's mostly me thinking through what the director and I have talked about, putting together my research, and then doing my favorite part, all of the drawings. But then after the design has been signed off with the director, then it's more about communicating those ideas to the costume shop, to all of the people that are making it happen, and making sure everything gets built correctly and looks the way I want them to on the actors.
So then that next step is the construction of
Yes.
the costumes. And how does that work?
Oh, well, it's all about getting the actors' measurements correct and maybe creating a new pattern from scratch to make the costume that I drew a reality. So we might make a mock-up, which is something out of cheap fabric to make sure it all fits correctly, looks right before we cut into our really expensive fabric, maybe hundreds of dollars a yard. Oh, okay, probably not that exciting, but before we screw up the actual fabric. And then there's fittings and dress rehearsals and a lot of weeks between the completed design and the completed costume.
What kind of help do you have in the shop with putting together these shows?
Well, I have work studies that work for me in the shop, a couple of volunteers, whether they be theater majors or just people interested that aren't eligible for work study, and they just give me whatever hours they have or whatever hours they can still be paid by the school for.
So which part of the process, research, design, or construction, is your favorite?
I do love the design. I love doing all the drawings. It's like making little works of art, although I try not to get too attached to the drawings because usually the final costume that's created is probably better than anything I drew. My drawings are pretty wonderful, but the real thing is always a step better.
Is there anything that you would like to add before we end?
Only that I'm always looking for more work study students, and you don't have to know how to sew. We will teach on site, so especially next year, a lot of my work studies are graduating, so I'm hoping to recruit some new workers.
That's all the time that we have. Thank you for joining us, Lindsay, and thank you for listening.